So you want to make your own video game music. Maybe you know nothing about music theory, but still want to learn how you can create your own epic video game soundtrack. Well, today I'm going to teach you the very basics of how to make your own video game songs, with the idea that even if you have zero experience, you can still create a soundtrack from scratch. Whether you're a solo indie developer trying to make music for your first game, or maybe you've been a fan of video game music like me and wanted to make your own, this video should be a helpful way for you to get started. Some important things to keep in mind. Nobody makes a perfect song on their first try. Music creation takes a lot of practice to master, and if you're expecting your first song to be a banger, it probably won't be. Don't let that frustrate you though. I only started making music about 2 months ago and I'm already seeing a ton of progress. Another thing to keep in mind is something that I don't hear a lot from other musicians, and it's the fact that it's totally okay to take inspiration from other music. Some may call it copying, but the evolution of music really comes from a ton of people copying ideas from each other to create their own sound. Listen to some of your favorite video game music, and don't feel bad about stealing some ideas here and there. Now, that doesn't mean you should completely rip a song's melody from someone else's work, but try mixing multiple ideas into your own style. And finally, like I said before, I've only been doing this for about 2 months, so don't expect some crazy masterpieces out of me. I just wanted to share some of the helpful tips I learned as a video game music lover. So let's get started. Today we're going to be making 3 different songs. We want a main theme for our game, a dungeon theme, and a fast-paced boss battle theme. Obviously, in order to make any kind of music, you're going to need an actual way to make it. I'm going to be using FL Studio, which is a very popular program among game composers because of how easy it is to use. I highly recommend giving this program's free trial a chance because it's really simple to figure out, but if you have another program, the majority of what I teach you will still apply. So first off, we're going to be talking about how to make a main theme for your game. Main themes are probably the most important element to a game's soundtrack because it's really the kicking off point for how the rest of the songs are going to sound. One of the most essential tips I got when I started making video game music was that every song needs to sound like it's part of the same collection. That means you're going to want to use most of the same instruments for each song, and it all needs to match a vibe. That way it feels like they all belong to one game. The main theme is super important because it's setting the groundwork for every other song that will come after it. Okay, so everyone is different, but I like to start building most songs with a simple chord progression to work around. If you're completely new to music, a chord is a group of 3 or more notes mixed together to make a sound. Really simple stuff, and creating your own chords is really simple too. I'm sure you've heard of major and minor chords before, major being mostly seen as happy notes and minor being more sad. But in order to not overload you with too much information, I'll teach you a really easy trick to make chord progressions. Basically, after playing any note that you like, you're going to want to move up 4 notes and place another. Then up 3 notes again and place 1 more. This is a major chord, and it works for every single note on the piano. If you want a minor chord, just do the opposite and place a note 3 up and then another 4 up from that one. If you want to make a chord sound a bit more advanced, just continue this pattern in any direction. It's really that simple to make your own chord progressions, and you can come up with unlimited combinations this way. Another thing you can do with your chords is find the rhythm of your song. There's a ton of different variations to go with, like the simple 4-bar rhythm, or something more exciting like a bossa nova rhythm. Just try messing around with a few different rhythms until you find a simple one that you like. For this song, I'll be using a rhythm like this. Next up, I like to throw in a bass line. This will add more depth to your chords. You can use either lower piano notes to create a bass line or a different instrument entirely. Then you're going to want to find a note from each chord to match with a much lower note. You could go randomly throwing notes down, but as a starter, I think it's much easier to stick with the chords themselves. For bass notes, you can either leave them for the full chord, or you can chop them up to have more of a wave to them. Here's an example of a song with a stable bass line, and here's a more mixed bass line. And now we get into the good stuff. Drums are super important for making a song not get stale and boring. Of course, you don't need drums in your song at all. The same can be said with any other instrument, but I do like it when the drums kick in and it kind of changes the mood of the song a bit. Drums are really easy if you want to come up with something simple. First off, we got hi-hats, which are like the glue that holds the drum loop together. They're usually the most consistent part of the drums. You could do a simple pattern like this, or an offbeat pattern, or a pattern that picks up the pace of the song. Then you usually want to start with a kick drum at the beginning of the first and second section. Then at the third little section, here you want a snare. This is how it sounds with this simple drum loop. You can play around with different combinations and move everything at your leisure, but this should be a great place to start. And finally, and arguably the most important part of a video game's main theme, the melody. Melodies are usually a bit repetitive, easy to play, and catchy. Think of all the ocarina songs from Zelda, or hey, even Megalovania from Undertale. All pretty repetitive, but extremely catchy. To make a melody, you're going to want to stay within the bounds of the chords. What I mean by that is that each note in the melody should be the same as the chord progression, except pitched to a different octave. An octave is talking about the different sections of the piano. For instance, here is a simple melody. And here's the same melody that moves up an octave. With that in mind, start playing with your notes, create a rhythm that somewhat matches the chords, and voila, you have your first melody. Okay, so that's the very basics for the main theme in a video game. All that's left to do is move everything around on the timeline and add a chorus section. Just so that I don't sound like a broken record, apply everything I told you to the chorus section, maybe change the bass pattern and make a new chord progression. You can leave the same drums as before or speed it up with the hi-hats to change the vibe. By the way, if you want to listen to these songs all the way through, there is a link in the description so you can check them out. Also, while you're down there, why not consider subscribing? We are getting pretty close to 10,000 subscribers, so why not help me get there? Okay, so now that we have a pretty solid main theme for our game, it's time to make a dungeon theme. For this, I had the idea of making a sort of water dungeon, because it seems like in every game ever, water levels have the best music. We are also going to be talking a bit more about the importance of instrument choices. If you think of a game like Donkey Kong Country, where you're running around the jungle, you're going to want a more woody, outdoor feel to your soundtrack. That's why a lot of the instruments used in the game are acoustic, with emphasis on sounds like the wood bass and bongos. On the opposite side of the spectrum, if you want to make a city-style theme, you might want some more mechanical sounds, if that makes sense. Any instruments that remind you of that specific location are going to work best for the song. So because I'm going for a water dungeon theme, I wanted to go with something that has a more atmospheric sound to it. I like these sounds because they kind of echo and drag off a bit, making you feel like you're in some kind of damp cave or something. Because we are going to make a theme for a water temple, we're going to use what I like to call watery bass. It's actually from a great plugin called Harmless, but it has this really cool wet sound to it that worked so well for this. I wanted to make the watery bass feel like the strongest player in this theme, so I created a lot of motion in my bass line. Remember, the bass should fall into similar notes as the chord progression, but a few octaves down. Then I added a very subtle drum loop consisting of brushes and snares, and finally the melody I found was a very fluid sound called whine, which is part of the same Harmless plugin. And here's what we got from that. And there we go, just like that, using the same skills we learned from the main theme, we have ourselves a super simple yet atmospheric water dungeon theme. And just to show the importance of your choice in instruments, here's another water level theme I made with inspiration from Mario 64. So finally we're on to the boss theme, where we will put everything we've learned to the test, but most importantly, I want to talk about how to avoid making your song feel repetitive. I briefly mentioned before that we will be separating different sections of a song, such as the verses or the chorus. As we've seen from every song so far, there's been a build-up until we reach the start of the melody. This time around, we're actually starting with the melody, and this one is going to be super simple. I chose this bell sound and made a little loop with it, but as you can imagine, if this continued throughout the rest of the song, it would get pretty annoying. So that's why we're going to use this sound for the build-up section. We're also going to add some subtle chords. These are just choir sound effects to make the boss feel grand and larger than life. Then we cut into the real start of the song. At the beginning, jumping from a verse to a chord can feel a bit jarring, but there are some really easy tricks to make things flow naturally. You could speed up the tempo of the hi-hats in the drums, speed up the snares, although it makes it sound a bit too much like an EDM song, unless that's what you're going for, or even change the instruments you're using. For the boss theme, first I changed the bell sounds to a metal guitar riff. Then I sped up some hi-hats to lead into the meat and potatoes of the song. When it comes to the chorus section of the song, the only thing I changed was the melody part of the theme. This doesn't work for every song, but you can see this commonly used in other game music like Lena Raine's Celeste soundtrack. To not make the chorus melody loop sound boring, I made a callback to the bell sounds at the beginning of the song to mix things up a bit. And finally, I wanted a resting section at the end of the song. This is just a more laid-back section, and I made a final callback to the intro by adding the choir music to the metal bass line. And that's it. Your timeline might look like a confusing mess, but now you've got a battle theme.
It's a smash hit.
Oh yeah.
I know I'm just a beginner like you guys, but hopefully this knowledge will put you on the right road to making your own awesome soundtrack. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, it's greatly appreciated. Also, feel free to subscribe if you want. I don't normally make videos like this, but I would be open to doing another in the future if that's something you guys want to see. As always, keep gaming to the fullest, much love to you all, and I'll see you later.